The United States, where a huge manhunt is continuing for a gunman who shot dead the chief executive of one of the nation's largest health insurance companies. Brian Thompson was fatally shot on the streets of New York just before 7 a.m. local time on Wednesday. He was found outside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, where he had been scheduled to speak at an investor conference later in the day. The 50-year-old father of two was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Well, in a statement, his family said, "We are shattered to hear about the senseless killing of our beloved Brian." They added, "Brian was incredibly loving father to our two sons and will be greatly missed." Well, New York City police officers are using facial recognition technology and a discarded cell phone to try and identify the suspect. Our North America correspondent John Sudworth is in New York with more.
As Brian Thompson arrived early for his meeting, behind him a figure can be seen stepping out of the shadows. The gunman fires at least 3 rounds before running away, all caught on CCTV video. The police have released this image showing the suspect moving further away from the scene by bike, and this one revealing part of his face, taken, officers say, minutes before the shooting. Mr. Thompson was CEO of United Healthcare, this country's biggest health insurer, providing cover for some 30 million Americans. As the investigation began, with numbers marking where the shell casings had been recovered, the police said they had little doubt the killing was premeditated.
In Midtown Manhattan early this morning, 50-year-old Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot and killed in what appears, at this early stage of our investigation, to be a brazen, targeted attack. This does not appear to be a random act of violence.
After the shooting, the street here was quickly closed off and the police investigation has been continuing all day. And while they say they do not yet have a motive, significantly perhaps, Mr. Thompson's wife has given a phone interview to NBC News in which she said her husband had been receiving threats of some kind. And although she didn't go into any detail, that will clearly feed into the investigation. Gun crime in New York is lower than the national average and extremely rare in central Manhattan. Those close by when it happened spoke of their shock.
I mean, it's New York. It's not normal here at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, but it's pretty scary, huh?
I feel so sorry for his family, and no matter what job he has, no matter where he worked or what he done, nobody deserves to be murdered.
For now, the priority is finding the suspect. Police drones, helicopters and dogs and thousands of CCTV cameras are combing the city street by street. And a reward of $10,000 is being offered for information that helps to track him down.
John Sudworth reporting from New York to the Middle East next. And the human rights group Amnesty International has accused the state of Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Amnesty says it reached its conclusion after looking at the broader picture of Israel's military campaign and the cumulative impact of its policies. Israel's military says the claims are entirely baseless and fail to account for the operational realities it faces. Well, let's get more on this with our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell, who is in Jerusalem. So, Yolande, what are Amnesty saying?
Well, Amnesty International, of course, is an internationally renowned human rights group based in London. It's had a 300-page report here almost, and it's been looking, it says, at official statements, more than 100 of those. It's got digital evidence, other visual evidence, witness statements. It's been looking at over a 6-month period to come up with its conclusion that it says the legal threshold for genocide has been met. This according to the 1948 Genocide Convention, the definition that it lays out. And that, of course, was something that was enacted in the wake of the mass murder of Jews in the Nazi Holocaust. Now, the Israeli officials haven't responded directly to this report. We have got that statement from the Israeli military where it says that its goal in Gaza is to dismantle Hamas completely, dismisses accusations that it's guilty of carrying carrying out any war crimes, saying that it acts in accordance with international law. But earlier this year, there were those hearings at the UN's top court, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, brought by South Africa and accusing Israel of genocide. And Israel has denied strongly such accusations, saying that what it's doing in Gaza is really self-defense after those deadly attacks led by Hamas on the 7th of October last year. This Amnesty report talks about the broader picture of Israel's military campaign, the cumulative impact of its policies. It says Palestinians face a deadly mixture of malnutrition and disease, as well as mass destruction.
Yolande Nell, live in Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Let's return now to our top story, the political turmoil in France after the government there collapsed, brought down by a no-confidence vote. Let's go live to our Southern Europe correspondent, Mark Lowen, who is in Paris for us. Good morning to you, Mark. What are we likely to see happen during the course of the day?
Morning, Nikki. Well, it is a very rainy morning, as you can tell, here in Paris, and very much echoing the kind of grim mood, politically speaking, that there is now in the country. I'm outside the Élysée Palace, the seat of France's president, Emmanuel Macron, and this is where the now outgoing Prime Minister Michel Barnier will come to tender his resignation in a couple of hours' time to the president. We're expecting President Macron to accept it. Constitutionally, Michel Barnier has to resign after that no confidence vote last night, and then President Macron is likely to try to name a successor very quickly, possibly even this evening. He is expected to make an address to the French nation at 8 o'clock p.m. French time. That is when the evening news comes on here in France, and Mr. Macron under big pressure to try to calm France politically, to calm the markets as well. France is in a period of real economic turmoil with a deficit that is twice the limit imposed by the European Union, very large public debt. That was behind Mr. Barnier's attempt to push through this austerity budget, which has now failed. And so there needs to be a new Prime Minister in place quickly to try to approve a budget for next year. But even if there is a new man appointed or new woman appointed as Prime Minister, the same problems here will remain.
Yeah, are there any names in the frame to be Prime Minister?
There are, for example, the now outgoing defence minister is one of those mentioned. A former socialist prime minister, Bernard Cazeneuve, is also somebody who was mentioned. But the problem is that France is so politically divided at the moment that it is hard to see who could come and actually unite this country. Michel Barnier was extremely reputable. I mean, he was extremely experienced. He was a minister 4 times. He had been a European commissioner twice. And so, the fact that he has failed is not a good sign, really, for somebody else being able to come in and unite the country. There could even be a technocrat government appointed here, which is something that France has never had, to try to at least get through the budget for next year. After the elections, inconclusive elections last summer, no new election can be called until next July. So somebody has to be at the helm of this country. And remember, Nikki, this is the European Union's second largest economy, second most powerful member, and so Europe's stability as a whole very much depends on somebody being able to take control of this country.
How much pressure will there be on President Macron, particularly, say, for example, from Marine Le Pen, to actually resign, and is that likely to happen?
You mentioned Marine Le Pen there. Just a reminder that she is the leader of the far-right National Rally Party, and she has been one of those who has kind of pushed the no-confidence motion. She demanded concession after concession from Michel Barnier in the budget. He did agree to some of her calls, but then it appeared that she kept on sort of moving her red lines further, and she and her party voted no confidence in him. The pressure is growing on President Macron. I mean, Marine Le Pen says she's not calling for him to resign at the moment, but she's laying the blame, as are many others, squarely at President Macron's feet for the division and stasis that this country is facing. He says he will not resign. He will see out the rest of his presidential term until 2027. But at the moment, you have to ask, how can he salvage the rest of his term? How can he salvage his legacy, given the division and stagnation that he has led this country to?
Mark Lowen live in Paris. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, we'll keep you updated with all of those events in France throughout the day here on BBC News. Now let's turn our attention finally to Film Awards season, which is underway, and Wicked has been named as Best Movie of the Year by the National Board of Review in the United States.
Come with me. What? To meet the wizard. Why couldn't tell me? This is your moment. I'm coming.
Now, the blockbuster based on the musical Wicked has only been out for a few weeks, but this award from the long-standing New York organisation puts it in the running for an Oscar nomination and also a nod at Monday's Golden Globes nominations. Now, the National Board said Wicked represents the pure magic that movies can bring to audiences. Now, amongst the other award winners, well, Best Actor went to Daniel Craig. That was for his performance in the movie Queer. Whilst Nicole Kidman took Best Actress for Baby Girl, in which she plays a high-ranking executive who has a romance with an intern. And I really need to go and see Wicked. It is something that everyone has been talking about. Stay with us here on BBC News. Sally is up next with news of Bitcoin in business today.
And financial crisis as the government collapses in a no confidence vote. Bitcoin bonanza, prices surge over $100,000 for the very first time as President-elect Trump picks a crypto-friendly candidate to run the top US financial watchdog. And we take a look at the business of volunteering as workers and bosses look to help. Hello and welcome. You're with Business Today. I'm Sally Bundock. So we start in France. You've been hearing the government there has collapsed after a no confidence vote in the Prime Minister, Michel Barnier. The move leaves France facing months of turmoil, plunging the European Union's second biggest economy into a political and financial crisis. Opposition parties called the vote after Mr. Barnier used special powers to push through a budget without parliamentary approval. Now, that budget that is now null and void sought to deliver some 60 billion euros worth of tax rises and spending cuts. Money, he argued, is needed to restore France's spiralling budget deficit, a deficit that is predicted to rise to around 6% of France's total economic output for this year, almost double the EU's target of 3%, which is designed to ensure member states pursue sound public finances. Well, I spoke to Leo Barincourt, who's from Oxford Economics. He's based in Paris, to find out what he thinks will happen next.
Well, the next steps now is for Macron to find a new prime minister that he will task to nominate a new government. And the main order of the day for the new government will be to try to pass a new budget, to have a budget for 2025. So it will probably be too late. So France will have to start the year without a budget. So the 2024 budget will be extended into 2025 until the new government can pass, hopefully, a new budget.
But the problem with Parliament currently is it's split and divided three ways, and getting agreement on a budget is going to be notoriously difficult, as Michel Barnier has discovered.
Yes, exactly, yes. I think it was the first time since 1962 that actually the French Parliament toppled the government, but we probably won't have to wait another 62 years to see it happen again. And in fact, the next government is likely to be just as weak as Barnier's government, because really it is impossible to find a stable majority in the current with the current National Assembly. It is nearly impossible. So the next government will also maybe fall very quickly too, and will have a very hard time passing a budget for sure.
The President is going to address the nation later tonight on television. I think President Emmanuel Macron wants to try and portray himself as the calm in the storm, but many are calling for his resignation.
Yes, well, I think Macron's resignation remains somewhat of an outlier scenario. It's something that he has clearly excluded for now, but clearly pressure on him to resign will intensify in the months to come if France kind of proves ungovernable with the current National Assembly, because there cannot be new legislative elections until July 2025. And if governments keep falling like Barnier's did, pressure on Macron will clearly increase.
And just briefly, Leo, the impact this will have on the French economy in the short term?
Well, I would say in the very short term, at least, the main issue, of course, with the French economy is public finances. Growth has been somewhat resilient for now and should remain so next year. The main issue is the size of the deficit and the size of the public debt. In the short term, we are cautiously optimistic. I would say that there shouldn't be too much trouble. The fall of the government was something that was expected by the market. Maybe the spread between French and German government bonds will widen a bit, but it should stay probably at the same level as now. But really, it's in the medium term that it's hard to see a way that France can find the money needed to reduce its deficit and to stabilize its debt.
Leo Barankou there from Oxford Economics. Needless to say, we're keeping across all the developments in France as the days progress. But within the European Union, we're now in a position where two of the biggest economies are in crisis. France has taken centre stage this week, but Germany is also facing snap elections early in the new year. In both countries, top politicians cannot agree on how to turn around their flagging economies. This, as a new Trump presidency in the US poses fresh economic challenges for Europe. And this might explain Ursula von der Leyen's enthusiasm to clinch a long-delayed trade deal with a group of South American nations. The European Commission President is in Uruguay for talks on the so-called EU-Mercosur deal. And to help us understand what the deal is, I talked to Dr. Aranza Gomez Arana, who's from the University of Northumbria. She's written a book on this deal. So first of all, she outlined what's at stake.
This agreement economically will benefit both regions. On the Mercosur side, it will help to trade in a cheaper manner in relation to the agricultural sector. In particular, the trade between Mercosur countries and European Union countries will allow the export of something along the lines of 99,000 tons of beef with a reduced tariff of just 7.5%. And in relation to poultry, around 180,000 tons will enter the European Union duty-free. On the European Union side, the main benefits will go to countries like Germany, because they will be able to export to Mercosur countries cars and parts of cars with a much reduced tariff than the one that they currently have, which is quite high. And also the sector of pharmaceuticals, they will be allowed to export products with again, reduced tariffs.
So you can see why for Europe, they are keen on this trade deal, especially when trade relations with the US might become that much more fractious next year. However, France is not happy about this at all. President Emmanuel Macron is saying it's not good for European farmers. There are other key players within Europe who are not happy about this deal. And also in Mercosur, Argentina's Javier Milei is threatening to veto it as well. So do you think we will get a deal?
We have been waiting for this deal for 25 years, so I am cautious, but I am optimistic in particular because, as you just mentioned yourself, von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, is on her way to Uruguay, and that is a really good sign that the agreement finally will be done. In relation to the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, it is expected to some extent that he will help with this agreement. However, he has made very clear that if this agreement does not happen this time, he might either leave Mercosur or ask for a change of rules so Argentina can develop trade agreements with the United States and with China.
Dr. Aranza Gomez Arana there talking about the EU-Mercosur deal. Now, we've got to talk about Bitcoin again today. It would seem there is no stopping the rise of the world's leading cryptocurrency. It's broken new ground, hitting all-time highs of over $100,000 a token. Feeding off the crypto-positive pledges from President-elect Trump, Bitcoin has surged more than 50% in value since his election. The latest surge comes off the back of Donald Trump's nomination for the head of the financial watchdog in the US. That's the US Securities and Exchange Commission. He's nominated Paul Atkins, who's a veteran financial regulator and crypto advocate. Ritika Gupta has more details.
Keeping with his promise for a crypto-friendly administration, President-elect Donald Trump plans to nominate former SEC Commissioner Paul Atkins to head the agency. That's according to a post on Truth Social. Currently the CEO at Potomac Global Partners, Atkins is well known on Wall Street and within Republican political circles. He'd been widely expected to get the role as the nation's top financial market regulator, and if confirmed, Atkins would succeed Gary Gensler, who has been widely lambasted by the digital currency community for his many efforts to crack down on the $3.5 trillion crypto market. Trump's position on crypto mirrors his larger pro-deregulation stance during his first time in office. Trump has promised an easier route for Bitcoin and its peers, and the market has soared since his election victory on November the 5th. Atkins served as SEC Commissioner from 2002 to 2008 under then-President George W. Bush. Along with adopting a pro-crypto stance, Atkins was critical of some of the reforms that emerged from the global financial crisis in 2008. Specifically, he criticized the Dodd-Frank legislation as too stringent on the banking industry.
Ritika Gupta there. Well, let's unpack this with Michael Field, European equity strategist at the Investors Morning Star. Hello to you, Michael. I mean, it was just a matter of time, don't you think?
Indeed, I think, look, you know, obviously you pointed out the rally in Bitcoin since Trump won the election. So obviously Bitcoin enthusiasts and investors have just been waiting for these kind of appointments. And obviously they're going to be very happy with this one, given that Paul Atkins' kind of philosophy around Bitcoin is exactly the opposite of his predecessor.
Yeah, and you just wonder what will happen, you know, given so many on President-elect Trump's team are seemingly pro-cryptocurrency, what that means for the industry in the new year.
So I think, you know, obviously deregulation is on the cards. It's the word that it's on everyone's tip of everyone's tongue. But, you know, what that means in practice is another question. I think, look, we spoke about the rules around Dodd-Frank. So obviously a loosening of those rules in terms of Bitcoin, you know, how people, you know, capitalize it, etc., and how it's actually used in the public domain will be the big question, I think. But 2025 could open a lot of things up for Bitcoin. And obviously that's what's kind of spurring the excitement at the moment in the price.
Yeah, and yet, as you say, there's huge excitement about the future for cryptocurrency. There's this assumption that perhaps deregulation is on the cards. And yet, just yesterday, a global investigation exposes alleged billion-dollar Russian money laundering network all about drugs and all sorts of stuff that was going on with bad actors at the center of it. And the reason they could do it all and move money around was because of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Obviously, one of the huge downsides to a kind of an anonymous form of payment, and something that the regulators had taken into account in the first place. But if indeed that gets unraveled, it opens up huge amount of possibilities, both on the positive for users of crypto, but also the negatives that you mentioned, the nefarious cases.
I mean, that's always been the criticism or the conversation about cryptocurrencies since its inception, that it just enables sort of trading to go on without transparency.
I think that's completely fair. I think the problem is that, you know, you have to take things one way or the other. And obviously President Trump's view is, you know, put the foot on the gas and let trade roll. So I think within that, then you have to really kind of assume the downsides, as you spoke about, that you're opening yourself up to these kind of possibilities also. So certainly a challenge for Paul Atkins and the SEC and how they go about, regulating that or deregulating, but also maintaining some sort of control. It's going to be a real challenge, I think.
Yeah, we shall keep a close eye, that's for sure. Michael, for now, thank you very much indeed. Let's now take a look at other business stories. More from the US. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has said he isn't worried President-elect Donald Trump will try to curb the independence of the central bank when he takes office in January. Speaking at an event in New York, Mr. Powell said the Fed's independence was protected by the law of the land. OPEC Plus is meeting today to decide its oil production policy for the new year. The oil cartel, that includes Saudi Arabia and Russia, are expected to extend current policy of holding back around 6 million barrels of oil a day from global markets in an effort to shore up prices. More than half the world's population. Don't we know it here at BBC News? It's been very busy and there is more to come. This week it is Ghana's turn, with the West African country going to the polls on Saturday to elect a new president and parliament. Daniel Dadsey takes a look at what's at stake.
This year has been a year of elections.
Every single day I will be fighting for you.
More than 50 countries worldwide have headed to the polls. Well, now it's Ghana's turn, a country that has been seen as a reliable democracy in West Africa at a time when neighboring countries have overturned their governments. So here's what's at stake. First, Ghana's once booming economy is struggling. Young people face high unemployment, inflation is up, and debt keeps growing. But Ghana is not alone. In Kenya, similar debt issues led to protests and higher taxes, part of a larger debt crisis facing many developing nations. This economic frustration has young Ghanaians often choosing between staying or migrating. But they say this election gives them a chance to insist on policies which could make it easier for them at home. Then there's the environment. Illegal mining, known as galamsey, is devastating Ghana's forests and rivers. These forests also don't just matter to Ghana. These are rivers often used by the local community as sources of drinking water. They help absorb carbon emissions, making them critical in the fight against climate change.
For Ghana, climate change is real and immediate.
Young Ghanaians are joining a global movement, demanding leaders protect the land and the climate. And it all ties back to governance. Recent concerns about corruption and weak institutions have Ghanaians worried. With recent coups in neighboring countries, Ghana's stability matters for the entire region. A strong, democratic Ghana helps support security and democracy across West Africa.
Where everyone is feeling the pinch, the economy will be top of mind for voters. This election isn't just about Ghana's future, it's about tackling issues locally in Ghana that actually resonate globally. So issues like excessive debt, climate change, and democracy. The world will be watching closely as Ghana makes its choice.
The world will be watching and will be reporting on that. Now, Christmas is around the corner, and if you are in the world of work, that might mean you have a Christmas party to go to. Love it or loathe it, it's going on. But what about something potentially more fulfilling, like volunteering? Business leaders are being asked to look to volunteering as a way of engaging employees in their local community. And today's International Volunteer Day, I spoke to Philippa Cornish from the Charities Aid Foundation, who explained why it is so important.
Volunteering can be a really important way to connect businesses and the communities that they work in. It's a great way to engage employees, as you said, and make them feel part of the communities they're in, and also connect them to some of the issues that may be affecting the areas they operate in. And there's a lot of research that show that when businesses support charity, it really attracts employees, makes them feel more loyal to their employer. And so there's a lot of good reasons to do it.
And the way it works is, in most cases, is the employees will take a day out of their normal working diary and actually be doing something completely different with a local charity.
Exactly. a day. Some businesses offer up to 5 days of the company time to let their employees do something a bit different, which can be a very re-energizing and rewarding experience. Often businesses will have a partnership with a charity, and part of that partnership, as well as funding them, will be chances to spend time with the charity and support them with things that they need, whether it be something skills-based or something a little bit more physical.
And to what extent do charities rely on this, you know, the corporate volunteering?
They do rely on it. Particularly, I think there's a lot of value in a business providing some skills-based volunteering. So people that maybe write a social media plan in their day job could support a charity with conceiving their social media plan. And there's a lot of options to do that, which is quite flexible, which is really making the most of the skills on the one side and the need on the other. I think where it's just a one-off day, you've got to be careful not to treat it just as a fun team building exercise and think about what the charity really needs and what the cost and resource might be to the charity to offer that day. So the best thing to do is really ask the charity what they need, how best to do it, and also maybe consider supporting them with some kind of financial donation as well so that they can resource that properly.
Some top tips there on International Volunteer Day. That's all from Business Today. I will see you very soon.
In Paris, where it's 9 in the morning, President Macron will address the nation later. We'll have the latest. South Korea's president and his ruling party battle an impeachment bid following his abortive attempt to impose martial law. The human rights group Amnesty International has accused Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Israel strenuously denies the allegations. And Bitcoin prices surge over $100,000 as Donald Trump picks a crypto-friendly candidate to run the top US financial watchdog. Hello, I'm Nicky Schiller. Welcome to the programme. We start this hour with the political and financial crisis in France. For the first time in more than 60 years, MPs have been brought down the government by a no-confidence vote. Michel Barnier will present his resignation later, becoming the shortest-serving Prime Minister in the history of modern France. The vote was decisive. 288 votes were needed to unseat Mr Barnier. In the end, 331 were cast to remove him. The budget, which was the cause of his downfall, is now defunct. France has been plagued by political uncertainty since the summer election resulted in a hung parliament, a result that can't be changed in an election before next July. Well, this is the scene live in Paris, where it has just gone 9 o'clock in the morning and it is raining now. President Macron will address the nation this evening. He's also expected to appoint a new Prime Minister quickly, not least because US President-elect Donald Trump is due in Paris this weekend for the opening of the Notre Dame Cathedral after that devastating fire 5 years ago. Our first report is from our Paris correspondent, Andrew Harding.
Moments before the voting began here in Paris, Michel Barnier made a final, rather forlorn plea to French MPs. The Prime Minister urged them to back him, his government and his budget, or create chaos.
I can't believe a majority of MPs here will vote to destabilize our institutions at a moment where our country is going through a deep moral, economic, financial and civic crisis.
Économique, financière et civique. But the answer came back fast and conclusive.
Pour l'adoption 331.
The Speaker of Parliament revealing that 57% of MPs had voted no confidence in the government. Politicians from the hard right and hard left of French politics briefly uniting on this one issue.
I don't feel my head spinning, and I don't consider this a victory. We had a choice to make, and the choice we made was to protect French people.
Having tasted blood, many French MPs now want more. Specifically, they want President Emmanuel Macron ousted. Heading home from a trip to Saudi Arabia, a badly weakened president has made it clear he's staying put. It is 62 years since France last found itself in a situation like this. On that occasion, President de Gaulle stood his ground and eventually regained control of Parliament. Today feels rather different. France is in debt, public frustration growing, a nation wrestling, like so many now, with the forces of polarisation and populism. I think it's tragic, says this woman, of today's vote. Nobody is considering the consequences. There's a lot of anxiety, this man adds. I'm upset both with the forces on the left and the far right. A government has fallen, but France's political deadlock remains firmly in place. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Paris.
Well, our correspondent Mark Lowen is also in Paris and outlines now what we can expect to happen today.
Well, it is a very rainy morning, as you can tell, here in Paris, and that much very much echoing the kind of grim mood, politically speaking, that there is now in the country. I'm outside the Élysée Palace, the seat of France's president, Emmanuel Macron, and this is where the now outgoing Prime Minister Michel Barnier will come to tender his resignation in a couple of hours' time to the president. We're expecting President Macron to accept it. Constitutionally, Michel Barnier has to resign after that no confidence vote last night, and then President Macron is likely to try to name a successor very quickly, possibly even this evening. He is expected to make an address to the French nation at 8 o'clock p.m. French time. That is when the evening news comes on here in France, and Mr. Macron under big pressure to try to calm France politically, to calm the markets as well. France is in a period of real economic turmoil with a deficit that is twice the limit imposed by the European Union, very large public debt. That was behind Mr. Barnier's attempt to push through this austerity budget, which has now failed. And so there needs to be a new Prime Minister in place quickly to try to approve a budget for next year. But even if there is a new man appointed or new woman appointed as Prime Minister, the same problems here will remain.
Yeah, are there any names in the frame to be Prime Minister?
There are, for example, the now outgoing Defence Minister is one of those mentioned. A former Socialist Prime Minister, Bernard Cazeneuve, is also somebody who was mentioned. But the problem is that France is so politically divided at the moment that it is hard to see who could come and actually unite this country. Michel Barnier was extremely reputable. I mean, he was extremely experienced. He was a minister 4 times. He had been a European Commissioner twice. And so, you know, the fact that he has failed is not a good sign, really, for somebody else being able to come in and unite the country. There could even be a technocrat government appointed here, which is something that France has never had, to try to at least get through the budget for next year. After the elections, inconclusive elections last summer, no new election can be called until next July. So, you know, somebody has to be at the helm of this country. And remember, Nikki, this is the European Union's second largest economy, second most powerful member, and so Europe's stability as a whole very much depends on somebody being able to take control of this country.
That is Mark Lowen, and here is the live picture just after 9 in the morning in Paris. You can see the Eiffel Tower there shrouded in the rain. Let's take you to the Élysée Palace, which, as Mark was mentioning, is where the Prime Minister Michel Barnier will hand in his resignation a little later. We will, of course, have live coverage of that throughout the day here on BBC News. Let's go from the political turmoil in France to the political crisis in South Korea. The country's ruling party has said it will not vote to remove the president from office after his failed attempt to bring the country under martial law. The opposition is now trying to convince enough lawmakers to defect to their side before a vote on Saturday night. President Yoon's shock announcement on Tuesday night caused chaos in the country and was quickly overturned by Parliament. The Defence Minister has taken responsibility for the situation and resigned. He now faces a travel ban as prosecutors investigate. There has still been no word from the President himself. Well, my colleague Steve Lai is in Seoul with the latest.
We haven't heard much from President Yoon at all. In fact, we haven't heard from him since he lifted that declaration for martial law just over a day ago. And we've also not expecting to hear from him as well. Local media have been reporting that the President's office have said that we're not expecting to hear from President Yoon at all today. Though when he does speak, we will, of course, bring that to our viewers. You mentioned as well that the former National Defense Minister has resigned. His resignation has been accepted by President Yoon, and he's also been put on an emergency travel ban, as you mentioned. He's accepted responsibility for the martial law declaration, and he's apologized for that. And that is really what caused all the political turmoil and chaos that we've seen here in South Korea over the last 2 days. Our Asia correspondent, Laura Bicker, has more on how the developments unfolded.
This candlelit cam followed a night of chaos. They gathered on the steps of the Parliament with one aim: to call for the impeachment of a president who declared martial law.
Because we have a history of defending democracy a few times, the people will strongly defend democracy once more.
I'm out here as a citizen who could not sit by and watch the democracy breaking down.
Resign, the group chanted, before their Mexican wave. Such a different scene from last night's turmoil. President Yoon plunged his country into martial law. Soldiers broke through the windows of Parliament to prevent elected members from overturning his decree. They were unsuccessful. And after 6 hours, Seoul's Parliament, not just its president, were back in control. Today, the building bore the scars of that struggle. Repairs have already begun, as has a motion to impeach the president.
If they're willing to violate human rights under martial law, it's obvious that they're also ready to sacrifice people's lives. Stay alert and fight with us.
Protests sprung up in other parts of the city as South Koreans took a moment to reflect. The prospect of martial law brought back chilling memories of authoritarian rule. In the 1970s and 80s, groups of students in Seoul took on dictators, often clashing with riot police and risking their lives. Their defiance and resilience helped South Korea become a democratic country.
South Koreans value their democracy. They fought for it, some died for it. And although they may be questioning just how robust it may be, they've turned out in their thousands to protect it.
But President Yoon remains in power. Some tried to march to his office, but they were blocked by police. It's unclear whether Mr. Yoon hears their calls to resign. But until he does, these demonstrations, however peaceful, will only grow. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Seoul.
Yeah, and we've seen various protests throughout the day here in Seoul from different opposition parties and interest groups as well. You may even be able to hear some right now where I am at the National Assembly. They're just assembled outside the front gates, about 100 meters from here. Now, to get a better understanding of what's been transpiring through the day here in South Korea, I'm joined by Jean McKenzie, our Seoul correspondent. It'd be great to be able to speak to you, Jean, about this and the developments that we've been seeing today. There have been some hearings. More information has been made available to us about what transpired that night when it came to those martial law decisions.
Yeah, so this afternoon, we've been having hearings right inside the National Assembly. So the lawmakers have been questioning some of the key figures in South Korea's military, trying to find out what their role was in enacting this martial law. And one of the key things that's come out of this really today is just how little people seem to know and how few people around the president seem to know. And I would say
these are people at the top of
They really are. I think the most staggering revelation we've had today is that the head of the South Korean army, this is the person that President Yoon put in charge of running his martial law. He says that he only found out when he saw the president announce it on television. He's also come out and said that he is not an expert in martial law and that he didn't have any part in writing this martial law order. We've also heard from the vice defense minister. He too said he found found out about it from watching the president on the television. And we know already that he didn't consult with all of his cabinet, that he didn't tell the United States, South Korea's main military ally. So we're really getting a picture of just how isolated I think the president was in the run-up to making this decision and in announcing it.
And this is the live scene outside the National Assembly, where you can see the rain is falling there. The umbrellas are up, but the protesters are holding a candlelit vigil. There are quite a few of them there with their umbrellas up, demanding that impeachment of the president. South Korean police saying that they are investigating him for alleged insurrection over his short-lived declaration of martial law. You can follow all the developments from our team, including Jean McKenzie and Steve Lai in Seoul, by scanning the QR code that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen.